what's going on, everyone? It's Steve with SJ Lincoln Realty, and today we're going to be talking about a recent 3-unit investment property acquisition in upstate New York. Together, over the course of this video, we'll be walking the property. We're going to be discussing the pros and the cons of the location, and finally wrapping up with some creative solutions when it comes to financing the actual acquisition itself. If you're someone that's been kind of on the fence about considering jumping into real estate investing, or maybe you already have a couple rentals and need some guidance on how to take that next step, I do think there are going to be some actionable advice items for you within the video. Again, this is Steve with SJ Lincoln Realty. Let's get into it. I'm looking forward to us spending some time together today, and I hope that you are as well. We'll open with a conversation about the location, what makes a municipality exciting from an investment standpoint. Also, what are some red flags that you're going to want to be on the lookout for? Obviously, we're going to touch on the property itself, what makes something a good investment opportunity. We are talking real estate, which means we're going to want to be familiar with the market in which we're purchasing, but also how do you put a dollar amount on a rental property? How do you price that? And we'll also cover, because this is, again, a rental property, we need to know the rental market. We need to know what our competition is doing. And then the most important thing is, how do we then beat our competition? And we'll finally wrap with a discussion on how to finance a rental property outside of just your traditional bank financing. Before we get there, just a brief background on who I am. As mentioned in the intro, my name is Stephen Luttman. I'm a real estate investor for the past decade, and I'm also a licensed broker with SJ Lincoln Realty in Ballston Spa, New York. Earlier points in my career, I had a stint at a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. I've done commercial debt restructuring for a local bank here, and also have done portfolio management for a real estate investment firm. I do have an MBA degree from the University at Albany, and these days my time is spent managing the rental portfolio as well as helping clients with the standard buying and selling of real estate here in upstate New York. We'll be focusing our attention today on the village of Corinth, which for out-of-towners is going to be 40 miles north of the state capital, Albany, 10 miles northwest of Saratoga Springs, and say 10 miles southeast of Glens Falls. There are a few reasons that I like this area. Most importantly to me is going to be population growth. Now, New York State has the distinction of leading the country when it comes to negative net migration. However, Saratoga County is going to be one of the few outliers where people are actually moving into the area, which is definitely a positive to see. The second reason is going to somewhat piggyback off of the first, and that's going to be the taxes associated with owning real estate. Now, for reference, for owners in cities like Albany or, say, Schenectady, to fund their schools, they're charged roughly $25 per $1,000 of assessed value. Whereas Corinth and other pockets of Saratoga County, it's going to be anywhere from half that amount to slightly less than half. There are, as investors, there's going to be a lot of things that we can control when it comes to our property. There are other components that are just beyond anything we can touch, and population growth and the amount we fund in taxes is going to be very much the latter. Let's now focus on the property itself. This is a 2,300 square foot, 3-unit apartment building, clearly in need of a pretty serious hug. Now, as we walk the property, you'll notice that we aren't running into any of the tenants, and that's because there are no tenants. They've all moved out. Now, this is actually a big plus because screening applicants yourself is always going to be more desirable than inheriting the previous owner's headaches. And speaking from experience, bad tenants are a primary reason that owners sell their buildings. Pro tip, if you are buying vacant or semi-vacant buildings, make sure your lender is aware of this. You don't want to find yourself in a position where you've paid for inspections, you've paid for your appraisal, and your lender reaches out and says, yeah, everything looks great, send me over the lease agreements, and you don't have any lease agreements. All things being equal, though, buying vacant buildings is going to be more preferable than buying occupied units. When looking at an acquisition, whether it's a real estate or it's a boat or a television, the first question is always, what is it worth? How much should I be paying for this? And when it comes to rental property, we're going to be focusing on recent sales. Now, we are only interested in transactions involving buildings 2 to 4 units in size. If you go larger than 4 units, that enters commercial real estate, which is priced entirely different than residential real estate. And we don't want anything smaller than 2 units. That's a single family house, and that has no relevance on our purposes here today. What am I interested in when I'm looking at a listing here? First and foremost is who lives there. And we can see we do have a 3-unit building here, vacant, and 1 tenant. However, from the description, we can see the tenant is moving out towards the end of the summer. So that's important to know. We want to know who lives there. We also want to know who pays for what. From a management perspective, the more things that can be in the tenant's name, the better. And here we do see that there are 3 separate electric meters. The heat source is going to be baseboard electric. So utilities are going to be in the tenant's name. That is always going to be more desirable than having things in your name as the owner. What else are we interested in? Well, how long have they been trying to find an owner? And we can see days on market being 131. What exactly is healthy? It's probably going to be closer to 30 days-ish. Should give you enough time for proper price discovery. But once you get north of a month, when the market is telling you something, you want to listen. And right now, the market is telling us at this point, the property was listed for $159,000. The market is telling us the opportunity in front of us is not worth $159,000. So that's something we want to respect. Respect the market because it's always going to be more educated than you are. This building down the street, based on the pictures, is going to be pretty similar to what we're looking to purchase. Now, this is a slight step up because we can see there are tenants actually living within the property, which again, ours is going to be vacant. But from a condition standpoint, this certainly isn't the Taj Mahal. This is going to be, kind of on par with what we're looking to do. Similar size, we had mentioned our building is 2,300 square feet. This is going to be just a little bit a little bit south of 2,000. Utilities are going to be separate, so this is going to be similar to us as well. And we also want to take a look at the cheat code. For me, when it comes to pricing real estate, is always going to be price per square foot. And here we can see they paid right around $79 per square foot. So that's going to be handy for us to know. Next property is again going to be on Oak Street. So this is going to be very close by. Again, this is a multifamily property, a little bit smaller in size, but certainly still very much relevant to what we're looking to focus on today. Separate utilities, again, it's checking a lot of the same boxes. However, this is an example of when a similar sale is not so similar. And the reason I say that is because when we scroll down to the bottom, take a look at the owner's name, U.S. Bank, which means this was a foreclosure. Now, that doesn't mean we throw this out and say has no impact on what we're trying to do today. For me, this gets much lesser of a weight. And the reason I say that is because there's a segment of the buyer pool that wants nothing to do with buying a foreclosure. It is more headaches, there is more stress involved. And for some folks, they're just going to throw up their hands and say, that's not for me. And the more that you shrink the buyer pool, the less price discovery you get. The larger the buyer pool, the more relevant that purchase price ends up being. The smaller the buyer pool, you can kind of get some wacky things happening. And on top of that, when you look at what type of financing was used by the buyer, 203K, so that's going to be a rehab loan. So not only are they buying a foreclosure, but in order to do so, they needed a rehab loan to be able to do it. So for me, I'm still taking into account that the sale occurred. However, the other Oak Street building is going to be more important to me, as is this one on Mill Street, which is going to be a mile or two down the road. So certainly still relevant. Very similar in size, so it's checking a lot of the boxes we want to see. Multifamily property, separate utilities, and here we can see they paid right around $66 per square foot if we scroll all the way to the bottom. So what does this mean to us? Well, if you were to average those sales out, we're probably in the low 70s, high 60s on a price per square foot. So I think it's fair to say these 3 buildings are probably a slight step up from what we're looking at. So we certainly don't want to be paying anything higher than $70 per square foot. And ideally, we probably want to be closer to mid to low 60s based on the condition. When it comes to determining what a property will rent for, there's a lot less involved with that than there is, say, for pricing the property itself. So we won't spend too much time on this. However, if you've been paying attention for the past couple minutes when we've been talking about these properties, you'll have noticed that on the MLS listing, oftentimes they list what the property is currently renting for. So obviously, if it's vacant, we can't give that too much weight. But anytime there's a tenant involved, that's great data for us because that tells us what something is actually renting for versus the alternative, which is going to be the major platforms that I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is going to be, your Zillows, your apartments.com. That's great to see what your competition is currently advertising, which is super, super important. Notice that those vacancies haven't been filled yet, though. So just because you list a property for $1,500 a month doesn't mean that that property is worth $1,500 a month, and it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to get. So, yeah, owners can list buildings for whatever they want, but the most important thing is when you check a Zillow, when you check apartments.com, and also the one that I use most often is going to be Facebook Marketplace, you can see what product your competition is offering, and ideally, you either want to be priced slightly below them or priced at the same but offering a better product. And that way you just win every single time. So again, the best data point is going to be the MLS, and that's going to be coming from your agent. And that'll give you what actual buyers, being tenants, and sellers, being owners of real estate, coming together, agreeing on a price that actually rented. That's going to be data from the MLS versus Zillow's apartment.com, Facebook Marketplace. That's going to be what owners are currently actively trying to get in the future. So again, most important thing is there is just to see what your competition is up to and make sure that whatever they're offering, you are one step ahead. What have we done so far? Well, we've examined the location where we're considering investing. We know, looking at recent sales, we know roughly, give or take, what we want to pay for the building. And we have a pretty good feel for, once we were to buy it, what we'd be able to rent it out for on the back end. Question that remains is, how the heck are we going to pay for this thing? And we're going to circle back to the property itself for a moment here. Instead of thinking about yourself, just stop and think for a moment. What is it that the seller needs? What do we know about this situation? Well, he has a nearly vacant building, meaning he's paying taxes, he's paying utilities, paying garbage, paying for insurance, with little to no money coming in to offset the expenses. And looking at the number of days on market, we know this isn't a new problem for him. This is months in the making. And based on the condition from the walkthrough that we did and the pictures from the listing, he's not putting any money into this building. He's pretty much riding this out, trying to get out. So this tells me that we have a seller somewhere in the spectrum financially of, at best, uncomfortable, and at the very worst, possibly in a form of distress. Buying multifamily, what you're going to encounter is that almost all of the time, the seller is going to be focused on price, price, price. Get me the best price. I need the highest price. This is not one of those situations. To me, what I'm seeing here is that a seller needs to get this off their plate as quickly as possible. So now that we've identified what the seller needs, how do we get that done? And the answer is going to be cash. If you have cash in a situation like this, you're just an absolute stud. You can pretty much more or less, pick your price. When you're being super aggressive, when you're firing in an offer on real estate, if you are paying cash, I always recommend including a letter from your bank outlining that you do have enough funds on hand to be able to close, because once they see that dollar amount, I think that's really going to kind of knock their socks off. So if you have cash in a situation like this, that's very, very strong. However, between the purchase price and rehab and liquidity to be able to ride out to get the building operational, you're probably not going to want to take something like this on with less than $250,000 worth of liquidity. And I get it. I know a lot of you are saying right now, $250,000, Steve, I don't have that. Who has that kind of money lying around? And I'm with you. I don't either, right? So which brings me to point two, which is going to be, if you don't have cash, then try exploring seller financing. And in a situation with seller financing, you're not involving a bank. The bank is the seller. So in this case, the seller would be lending you the money to buy the building. Well, why would they want this? Well, A, they're getting a quick close, which we know that this person probably is after. So you're not waiting on an appraisal. You're not waiting on the underwriting team at the bank to get back to you, because there is no appraiser, there is no underwriting team. There's just two people involved, you and the seller. So if we know that we can achieve a quick close going that route, how do we make it happen? The property needs a lot of work. We know that to be true, and we're going to be spending a lot of money on rehab. Having enough liquidity is massively, massively important. You don't want to be halfway through your rehab and suddenly the money runs out. There's a term risk of ruin. This is how investors get wiped out. You overextend yourself, you take on something that you think you can get done for X amount, and it turns out to be X plus Y, and you don't have Y. You get wiped out. That's risk of ruin. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we need to limit our upfront expense, and we also need to limit our monthly expense going forward after we close to make sure we have enough time and money to get the building rehabbed, get tenants in there, start paying rent to offset the expenses. So that's the structure that we need. How do we make that happen? What this ultimately ended up looking like, and there's no set framework, right? So what I'm going to tell you is kind of what we ended up doing, but it doesn't need to look exactly like this. It's kind of it's more of a choose your own adventure, if you will. There's no set map you need to follow. It's not like you're trying to meet the strict criteria of obtaining FHA financing. It's whatever you and the seller agree to. So what ultimately we ended up doing was $20,000 down to the seller at time of closing. So he received $20,000. And for the next 18 months, he's going to be receiving 5% interest-only payments for, again, 18 months, so a year and a half. And what was he able to get? He got his quick close. So we were able to get this done in, I believe it ended up being a little less than 30 days. So that's going to be much quicker than if you went, the route of a bank. You could be 60 days, maybe a little bit less. So he got his quick close. He got a dollar amount he was comfortable with. He's going to be receiving additional income for the next 18 months. And after the 18 months is up, say 2 months before then, I'm going to start shopping this to local banks, trying to get some long-term financing to take out the seller financing here. So again, in summary, I know this is a bit long-winded, but he got a quick close. He got a dollar amount he was comfortable with. I got a low down payment, which means I have enough to rehab the property, and I also have, for the next 18 months, a very minimal relative to bank financing monthly payment going forward. So ideally, I'll have enough money on hand to be able to get this up and running. This is going to be a two-part series. In the next video, we're going to be talking about structuring of a partnership, building permits, budgeting for a renovation, and at the very end, doing a financial analysis on how it turned out. If for any reason, let's say we get to second quarter of 2023 and you haven't seen a part two, that means that things went terribly wrong. So you might want to check in on your boy, but ideally there's going to be a second part to this series. If you've gotten something out of this video, a few things I'd like to ask of you. First and foremost, if you think, yeah, this is kind of good, maybe I want to learn a little bit more, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, SJ Lincoln Realty. The best social platform to follow is going to be Instagram, though. That's the most active. That's where I would push you to go. For people who did think that this was really good, they got a lot out of it, and you want more of me in your life, you can, if you're a reader, go over to sjlincoln.com/join. That's where you can sign up for the company newsletter that goes out probably twice a month. We don't sell information. All of your emails remain in-house here. But if you're a reader, that's going to be a good resource for you. If you're more of a listener, fire up the Expected Returns podcast on all the major platforms. Again, that's going to be the Expected Returns podcast. That's me, and I do about 15 minutes every couple of weeks on what's happening in real estate, what's happening in the world of finance. So you might find enjoyment in that if you want more of me in your life. And lastly, if you really, really liked this and you want to do me a solid, if you or someone you know in the capital region has a real estate related need, let's definitely connect. So it's going to be steven@sjlincoln.com. That is my email address. That goes directly to me. There are no receptionists. There are no new agents learning on the job. It goes directly to me. Or head on over to sjlincoln.com/book-a-call, and you can schedule on the calendar, whether it be a phone or a Zoom conversation with me. So again, that's steven@sjlincoln.com. My email address, sjlincoln.com/book-a-call is the website to schedule something with me. Thanks for making it to the end. I know that there are an infinite number of things pulling on your attention span, so the fact that you spent some of your day with me makes me feel great. I hope you did get a lot out of this. If you do have questions, obviously you can send them directly over to me. I'd prefer if you put them in the comment section. That way I would almost guarantee you, if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking about it too. So if you put it in the comment section, you have my word. I am going to answer that. But regardless, hopefully you did get something out of this. I enjoy doing it. I hope that you enjoyed it. And we will absolutely connect again sometime soon. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again soon.